The Mothman of Pleasant Point, a true horror story. In the fall of 1966, the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, became the epicenter of a nightmare. What started as whispers of a strange creature lurking in the shadows soon turned into full-blown terror. It began on a cold November night. Two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Millette, were driving near an abandoned TNT factory on the outskirts of town. The factory had long been forgotten, its empty halls echoing with the wind and its broken windows reflecting the moonlight. As they drove past the ruins, Linda let out a gasp. Standing near the factory was a figure, tall, at least 7 feet, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Its body was humanoid but covered in dark, leathery skin, and as the car's headlights illuminated it, massive wings slowly unfurled from its back. Roger, gripping the steering wheel, hit the gas, but as the car sped away, the creature took flight. The four could hear the eerie sound of its wings flapping, but there was no flapping motion, just a smooth, unnatural glide. It followed them for miles, only vanishing as they neared the city limits. Shaken, the couples reported their experience to the local police, but their story was met with skepticism. However, they weren't the only ones who had seen the creature. Over the next few days, more reports surfaced, strange shadows looming over houses, a pair of burning red eyes watching from the darkness, and a sense of doom that hung over those who saw it. One particularly chilling encounter came from a man named Mark Daniels, a volunteer firefighter. He had been called out to a disturbance in the woods behind an old farmhouse. The caller had heard strange noises, like something massive shifting through the trees. As Mark investigated, his flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows across the underbrush. Then he saw them, two glowing red eyes staring directly at him. Paralyzed, he could only watch as the figure stepped into view. It was larger than any man, its wings half spread as if preparing to strike. But instead of attacking, it let out a strange, high-pitched screech that sent Mark scrambling backward. In the blink of an eye, the creature ascended into the air, disappearing into the night. As sightings increased, fear gripped Point Pleasant. People avoided the woods, and even the bravest refused to drive near the old TNT factory. Then, just over a year later, tragedy struck. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge, an old but sturdy structure connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio, suddenly collapsed. Dozens of cars plummeted into the icy waters below, and 46 people lost their lives. It was one of the worst bridge disasters in American history. In the days leading up to the collapse, several people had reported seeing the Mothman perched on the bridge or flying overhead. Some believed it was an omen, a warning that tragedy was coming. Others thought it was the cause. And then, just as mysteriously as it appeared, the Mothman was gone. No more sightings, no more red eyes in the night, only the lingering fear that it might return someday when another disaster loomed. To this day, no one knows what the Mothman really was. A cryptid, a supernatural entity, a harbinger of doom. But those who saw it never forgot. And when the wind howls through the trees on dark nights, some claim you can still hear the beating of massive wings in the distance. The return of the Mothman decades passed, and Point Pleasant slowly became just another small town with an eerie legend. The old TNT factory remained abandoned, a decaying relic of the past. The Silver Bridge was rebuilt, and people moved on. But some never forgot. One of those people was Daniel Carter. He had been a child when the bridge collapsed, but he remembered the fear in his mother's voice when she spoke of the Mothman. She had seen it, she swore, on the night before the tragedy. Daniel never believed in monsters until the night he did. It was a bitter winter evening in 2001. The air was thick with fog, and the Ohio River stretched like a black mirror beneath the new Silver Memorial Bridge. Daniel, now in his 40s, was heading home from a late shift at the chemical plant. He had driven this route hundreds of times, but on this particular night, something felt off. The first sign was the radio. The signal cut out, replaced by static. He tapped the dial, but the noise only grew louder, like distant screams buried beneath the white noise. His headlights flickered. Then just as suddenly, everything went silent. That's when he saw it. Perched on the steel beams of the bridge was a dark figure, its wings folded at its sides. The moment Daniel's headlights passed over it, two enormous, burning red eyes snapped open. A cold chill ran down his spine. He hit the gas, but before he could speed away, the creature moved. It didn't leap or flap its wings. It simply dropped from the bridge, vanishing into the mist below. Daniel's breath came in short gasps as he drove, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. He forced himself to believe he had imagined it, but when he got home, he found a single deep scratch running along the roof of his truck, too precise to be from a branch, too shallow to be from an accident. The next morning, the news reported a freak accident on the Silver Memorial Bridge. A cargo truck had swerved off the road, crashing into the guardrail. The driver died instantly. Witnesses said he had been speeding, as if trying to escape something. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he knew what, but it didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, sightings of the Mothman surged. Hikers in the nearby woods spoke of feeling watched. A group of teenagers claimed to see a dark shape circling above an abandoned farmhouse. A woman reported a terrifying encounter where a massive winged creature landed on her front porch, staring at her through the window before disappearing into the night. Then, the dream started. Daniel found himself waking at 3:33 a.m. every night, his heart pounding. In his dreams, he stood at the edge of the bridge, looking down at the river. The water churned, as if something massive was rising from below. He could hear the sound of wings, feel the burning gaze of red eyes on his back, and always just before waking, a voice whispered in his ear, "It's coming." By the time the following December rolled around, the town of Point Pleasant was once again gripped by fear. Something was about to happen, something terrible. And on December 15th, exactly 34 years after the first bridge collapse, a freight train derailed on the outskirts of town, spilling hazardous chemicals into the water supply. The river turned black. Dozens fell ill. Officials called it a freak accident, but those who had seen the Mothman knew better. Daniel moved away not long after. He never spoke of what he saw again, but he knew the truth. The Mothman was never gone. It had only been waiting. And one day, when disaster was near once more, it would return. The Mothman prophecies continue. Years passed, but the unease in Point Pleasant never truly faded. The derailment was just another entry in the long list of strange occurrences tied to the Mothman. Some whispered that it was a guardian, warning of impending doom. Others believed it was the cause, a harbinger of misfortune that lured disaster wherever it appeared. But for Daniel Carter, the nightmare wasn't over. Even after moving 2 states away, he still felt its presence. The dreams continued, visions of bridges crumbling, of people running in terror as the sky darkened with massive wings. He woke up breathless, heart hammering, as if the creature had been standing over him, watching. Then the phone calls started. At first, they were nothing but static, then a garbled voice, low, distant, barely human. It whispered numbers, dates, places Daniel didn't recognize. The last call was different. The static cleared, and a single phrase came through, chilling and unmistakable. "It knows where you are." Daniel wasn't the only one receiving messages. Reports surfaced of strange figures standing outside homes at night, their silhouettes unnaturally tall and motionless. People heard scratching at their windows, but when they looked outside, nothing. Drivers on back roads claimed a pair of red eyes stared at them from the treetops, following their cars for miles. Then a video surfaced online. It was grainy, taken from a dash cam on a remote highway near an abandoned steel mill. The driver had been heading home from a late shift when his car stalled. The footage showed him stepping out, confused, looking under the hood. Then the streetlights flickered. In the background, a shadow moved. The camera caught a tall, humanoid shape, its massive wings folded behind it. The figure stood at the edge of the road, unmoving. As the driver turned around, the creature's head snapped up, and its red eyes burned into the lens. The video cut out. Authorities found the man's car abandoned the next morning. Engine still running, driver's door open. The man himself was never seen again. The footage went viral. People called it a hoax, but those in Point Pleasant knew better. Daniel knew better. One night after another cryptic phone call, he decided he had enough. He was going back to where it all began. Returned to Point Pleasant. The town hadn't changed much. The streets were quiet, the air thick with an unshakable tension. The old TNT factory still stood, its rusted skeleton hidden in the overgrowth. The place where the first sightings happened, where the Mothman had made its presence known. Daniel drove past the ruins, his pulse quickening. He parked at the edge of the woods, stepping out into the crisp night air. The silence was deafening. Even the crickets refused to sing. He felt it before he saw it, a shift in the atmosphere, a heavy presence watching. Then, movement. From the trees, a shadow emerged. Taller than any man, its wings stretched unnaturally wide, blotting out the stars. Those eyes, those burning, blood-red eyes, locked onto Daniel. The air around him grew thick, suffocating. His limbs froze, his breath caught in his throat. It was as if time itself had stopped. The Mothman tilted its head, studying him. Then, without a sound, it raised one clawed hand and pointed. Daniel followed its gaze toward the town, toward the bridge. The wind howled, and suddenly the creature vanished. One moment it was there, the next, gone. Daniel didn't hesitate. He jumped into his truck and sped toward town, his heart racing. Something was coming, something worse than anything before. As he reached the Silver Memorial Bridge, his headlights flickered. Then his radio crackled. A voice, distorted, warped, but unmistakable, whispered one final warning. "It falls again." And then in the distance, the ground began to shake. The final warning. Daniel barely had time to think. The ground trembled beneath his tires as he slammed the brakes near the Silver Memorial Bridge. His breath came in ragged gasps, the words still echoing in his head. "It falls again." He stepped out of his truck, heart pounding. The bridge stood before him, stretching across the Ohio River, its steel beams reflecting the glow of streetlights. Cars passed by as if nothing was wrong, but something was wrong. A deep, low hum vibrated through the air. It wasn't coming from the bridge or the wind. It was something else, something unseen. Daniel scanned the sky. sky, his gut twisting. Then a shadow moved above. The Mothman was perched on the highest beam, its wings spread wide, its crimson eyes locked onto him, unblinking. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. Daniel's fingers trembled as he reached for his phone, but the screen flickered. 3:33 a.m. A chill crept up his spine. He had to warn someone. But warn them about what? Then, the first scream. It came from a car near the center of the bridge. A woman stumbled out, pointing at the sky, her face pale with terror. Others followed, their voices rising in panic. Something was happening, and then the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the bridge. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. The only light left was from those burning red eyes staring at him from above. And then it began. A metallic groan echoed through the night as the steel cables snapped. One by one, they gave way with sickening, thunderous cracks. The bridge lurched. Cars slid. People screamed, their voices lost in the chaos. Daniel ran. He sprinted toward the nearest vehicle, yanking the door open. "Go! Get off the bridge!" he shouted, dragging the driver from their daze. He turned, urging others forward, his lungs burning with each breath. Behind him, the bridge tilted. A deep, guttural roar, not human, not animal, ripped through the air. Daniel turned just in time to see the Mothman take flight, its wings blotting out the stars. It soared past him, vanishing into the night. And then, the silver memorial bridge collapsed. Steel twisted, concrete crumbled, and cars plummeted into the dark waters below. The sound was deafening. Daniel barely had time to throw himself forward before the pavement beneath him gave way. Cold, the river swallowed him whole. Darkness pulled at his limbs, the world above muffled by rushing water. He kicked, fought, pushed against the weight, dragging him down. Then a hand, strong, unyielding, gripping his arm, yanking him upward. Daniel gasped as he broke the surface, coughing, choking. His vision blurred as he was dragged to the shore, the wreckage of the bridge still crumbling behind him. But when he turned to thank his savior, no one was there. Only the wind, only the darkness. And in the far distance, two burning red eyes fading into the night. The aftermath. The news called it a structural failure. An investigation was launched, officials scrambling to explain how a stable bridge collapsed without warning. But the people of Point Pleasant knew the truth. The Mothman had returned. Daniel survived, but he never spoke publicly about that night. He left town shortly after, disappearing into obscurity. But sometimes on cold winter nights, he still dreams of red eyes watching from the shadows, of a voice whispering in the dark. It falls again, and somewhere, in the forgotten corners of the world, a shadow with wings waits